In the last few months, a much-needed spotlight has been placed on the lack of diversity in all corners of the design industry. Some companies and organizations have responded by hosting discussions. Others have taken stock of their systems and are changing their business practices. Meaningful initiatives have sprung up, which many in the design community have wholeheartedly supported. But we need to do much, much more. One of the strongest voices of impact and change over the last 15 years has been interior designer Kia Weatherspoon. Through her firm, Determined by Design, she spearheaded a mission of design equity based on the core belief that well-designed interior spaces are not a luxury for few, but a standard for all. Her advocacy has prompted housing developers, agencies, and industry partners to have difficult conversations and take action. Today, she'll be discussing the very real challenges we face as an industry and ways we can shift the narrative. Please join me in welcoming Kia Weatherspoon, who'll be chatting with my colleague, Kaitlin Petersen.
Hey, hey, hey. Hi. Welcome. I know we can't do this, girl.
Welcome, Kia. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. You spent your entire career pushing against the idea that design is a luxury service for a select group of people. But I want to roll it back a little bit. What shaped that way of thinking for you?
So it's funny because I think everyone comes to design from a different perspective, right? And mine comes from two places. And I didn't know they were happening at the time. So when I was younger, my brother was incarcerated for 15 years. And we started to go visit him in prison. And every year I started to think like, this isn't a dignified experience for me as a visitor. The next year I would start thinking about all the children I saw coming to visit their fathers. Then I started thinking about the spouse and the staff, right, who were there 8 hours a day, sometimes 12 hours a day, every day. And it stayed in the back of my mind. Fast forward, I didn't get money for school and I decided to join the military. And shortly after I joined the military, September 11th happened. And I was on my first of 5 deployments to the Middle East. And I was in the Middle East, I was in a bare base in Tent City, and I needed to cry. And I was in a tent with about 14 other women and I had no privacy. So I took some sheets, I hung it from the top of the tent and I made 3 sheet walls. And I bawled like a baby for 15 minutes. And that was the first space I ever created. And it wasn't about a fancy finish or anything else. It was just how that space, it healed me, it comforted me, it changed me. So I would deploy 4 more times, and every time I would have to do this. So when I got out of the military, I was like, I want to do this thing where I'm creating spaces for people. And I didn't even know what it was called, but that's what led me to interior design. And it sounds like a cool story, but at the same time, I think a lot of designers of color, they sometimes come through design from a more traumatic or a need to heal experience. And that's how I got here, which I think it led me back to what you said of interior design. It's not a luxury for a few, it's a standard for all, and something that we all need every day.
That space making, that sense of your own space.
I think it's space making, but it's also comfort and healing. I think you think about the things that embrace you and bring you comfort and solace. We all need that every day, no matter what space we're inhabiting.
Did you bring that with you into design school? Did you know from the beginning that that's where you wanted to take that degree?
So, frankly, no. I think you think about how design is marketed to us. It's luxury, it's hotels, it's retail, it's these
really shiny.
It's like I always say, it's sparkly with glitter and ribbon and bows, right? That sounds a little tacky, but right, it's literally this luxury thing. So I started out in design wanting to do hospitality design. And I early on, I got to work at a hotel management company, and that really shaped me. But no, this equity mission, it didn't happen until I started my business, probably about 10 years later. So no, I didn't come through it. But I think it was always inherently there. It was underlying this idea of what more can design be instead of this luxury service.
Do you feel like students are encouraged to chase careers that are all about the shiny?
Yeah. So I was just having this conversation, and I asked this he's been in the industry about 3 or 5 years now, and he says he went to the big fancy firm, right? And he said, I got the brass ring. And he was like, and it wasn't really that great. And I said, well, why did you go that route? And he says, that's what we see. And this is no shade, right? We see the Genslers, we see the IA, we see the Perkins and Will. That's what they see. They don't see these smaller boutique firms doing more impactful and community work. But what makes me hopeful is they want to do it. This next generation of designers, it's not about the bows and the ribbons and the shine. It's really about how do you change people's lives through design. And that, to me, gives me hope.
When your career, so you start your own firm, and your first project is with a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And you were working, it was a shelter for domestic violence survivors. How did that project help you shape the vision for your practice?
So it's my naivete says you quit your job with no money and you start a business and then you go do free work. It was so cute. But this project literally ended up shaping my practice because I go in there all enthusiastic and we're going to redesign some public spaces for 12 women and 32 children. And I approach these women with all this energy and they're like, 1, calm down. 2, we don't need what you're doing. And I could have been taken aback, but I knew they were just unaware.
What did they mean by we don't need what you're doing?
They just felt like interior design, they could not connect how an interior designer could make any difference in their life.
The people running
the domestic
facility?
Violence survivors.
Okay.
The people running the facility, they wanted something different. But the actual women we were serving, which was very important right off the bat, that we had to engage them in the design process. And the conversations went from, we don't need this, to they could tell me what all the other women and their children needed, to, oh my God, I thought this was something I could only see on TV. I didn't know I had access to this. And one woman also said to me, is this something I could do one day, right? So all these, right? But design, right? It's about the big reveal. So we finished the project, and yes, it's pretty. But the woman comes up to me, and she said, Miss Kia, when I walked into this room, I realized change was possible for me. And right then I knew the people who need access to well-designed spaces the most, they don't know they don't have it, they don't know they need it, and they don't have an advocate. So I built my practice around being that advocate. And that has been the guidepost for the past 8 years.
I say, is that still your overarching mission of Determined by Design?
Yes, it has not changed. It will never change. As long as design outcomes are inequitable in low-income communities, I'm in business.
What are some of the design challenges you're looking at in your work right now, and how do you approach them?
Oh, so it's so funny because, to this day, I could be working with an affordable housing developer or a nonprofit agency or a housing authority. And again, they're so far removed, they will say, well, does this demographic need an interior designer? Because they're thinking that this is a luxury commodity. So that is the biggest challenge I face day in and day out. Or my architectural partners. Oh, our clients don't use a separate interior design consultant on affordable housing projects. But why? Right? So that is a big part of what we do, is literally advocating for our presence to be on the job. Another component of that is transparency and pricing. Our biggest nemesis is the general contractor. And I think industry has kind of either put this cloud over it where there is no transparency in pricing. So a lot of times the light fixture isn't $20,000. It's just been marked up so much, it's not allowed to be on the job. So we call a lot of folks to the carpet when it comes to pricing and materiality. Do they get upset? Yeah. Do I care? No, because it's the design outcome for that person who doesn't have an elevated space. I care more about that than offending my general contractor.
You recently gave a presentation where you showed the audience different rooms. And you asked them, who is this space for? Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that.
So it was called a presentation about design without labels, right? So we showed them a community room in an affordable housing project. Then we showed them this kind of elevated interiors of a common area. Then we showed them what looked like could be a transitional lobby outside of a conference room. So I'm asking these designers and architects, which space is for who? The pretty spaces were for luxury, high-end residential. The ugly spaces were for like low income or support services. And then I surprised them all and said, well, actually, the elevated spaces were for affordable housing, and that was our work. You should not be able to tell the difference between a design. It should be equal across the board, no matter who the end users, what their demographics or their socioeconomic background. And I think as designers, if we are constantly labeling what someone deserves, that limits the design outcome that you provide as a designer. And you have to get that out of your psyche in order to do better for all people.
How do you do that? How did you start to kind of break that mold in your practice?
Ooh, Design 101, we use a concept, right? It's back to basics. We are very concept driven. That was instilled in me back when I went to undergrad at Moore College of Art and Design. Use a concept, right? And
Not a theme.
No, not a theme. And here's the difference, right? The concept is about the history of the community, the people, the narrative, historical facts and figures, right? A theme or a style is, we want something mid-century modern, or luxury, or modern luxe, right? Or residential. All that's bullshit, right? The real thing is, what is the story of the people and the community, and how do you translate that into tangible design elements and color schemes, right? And I think that's what we're selling. And our clients, thankfully, are starting to buy in. We don't want what's trendy. We want the story. We want the depth. We want the people, when they walk into this space, to see the historical connections of their community so it's not a race. That's the challenge. And I think that's what our industry is missing, because we're so caught up in hype and styles, but not people and communities, which is who we serve as interior designers, right? That's how we've been successful, but it's back to basics. Use a concept.
Have a story.
Have a story. You think about, people resonate with stories, not things. And that story is what's made us successful.
When you were talking earlier about kind of having to convince stakeholders that you needed to be on that job, what did those conversations look like? How did you make space, for your practice to make a difference?
Well, interior design is the greatest form of empathy in practice, right? We just have to channel that in all people. So if my client was a developer, I would say, do me a favor. I say, Dan, close your eyes. Close your eyes, Dan, and I want you to think about your son or daughter is about to have a birthday party, and what does that space look like? What do you want it to feel like for your son or your daughter? And then Dan would start to describe what the space would look like. Now, Dan wouldn't say bows and ribbon and glitter, right? Because Dan's not gonna use that language, but he would start to say it had natural light, softness, it was bright, it was airy. And then I say, well, Dan, Chanel, who has 3 kids, she wants to have a birthday party, but in the multifamily room, the community room that you're doing for her, you only want folding tables and chairs and VCT. Is that a space you would want for your kid? And boom, just like that. It's getting them to see the people we are serving as people, right? Not just a low-income resident. So empathy has been a big part of the conversation, and being unafraid to challenge them. That if it's not good enough for your kids, it's not good enough for someone else's. And that's a lot of what we do, is reminding them, you are building communities for people. Yes, development is about dollars, but without the people, there is no development. So we just tap into that every time. And they kind of like it. Because and this is why, because I think most A&D professionals, right, they're worried about deliverables, right? You got to get the deliverables, so you can get the dollars, so your firm can stay in business. I'm concerned about the people. And a lot of my clients have said, like, your counterparts aren't challenging us. They're looking at it like, we just spent $133,000 per unit, and all we got was VCT and shitty paint? What are we paying for? So it's refreshing that they want different. As designers, we just have to provide that to them and challenge them and be unafraid.
That's amazing. Thanks. I know government policy is a big focus for you as you look ahead. Why is that? And what changes do you think we need to see?
Oh, I always say, I'm just the designer girl, right? And they're like, you're the designer talking about policy? Why? And this is a granular thing. Kitchen cabinets and affordable housing. HUD instituted a policy of the type of cabinet that could be used in low-income housing 50 years ago. It has not changed in 50 years.
I can't think of too many people who want that same cabinet that their parents were procuring 50 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so this does two things, right? It pigeonholes the developer to a certain product, right? And a product that it's not even necessary today because manufacturing has changed. There are tons of options. But the developer will only do the same thing over and over and over. We've used the same cabinet for the past 40 years, the same door style and color. And I'm like, okay, first of all, don't tell anyone else that. But two, it's just wrong. And this policy, this housing guideline, it's much more expensive. So it's not necessary, and it's costing the developer more money on the overall deal. So while I'm trying to get you to not spend a lot of money on this shitty ass base cabinet, right? When you could do more. So the policy is we need to change these policies within the housing guidelines. It also goes down to plastic laminate countertops, carpet and unit, and that gets down to indoor air quality, particles, glues and laminate used for carpeting and plastic laminate. And this is a new construction happening in 2019.
With 50-year-old standards?
50-year-old. So you're right off the bat dating your project, right? Right off the bat.
Limiting it.
And
certainly.
limiting it.
Yeah.
And this is the thing. Someone says, oh, poor people don't care if they have granite countertops. The point isn't not the finish. It is what quality and level of integrity and beauty are we bringing to these spaces? Beauty is a big part of healing and health and wealth. And if we constantly diminish it to, oh, they don't care. That's not the point. Is would you live here? Is this good enough for you? It's that empathy lens. And this is why the policy work is really important.
I know for you, equity isn't just a hiring issue or just a problem of the pipeline from design schools into industry. It's about access and exposure to good design and creating those spaces for kids to have the birthday party in. What is your challenge to the design industry? Or for those of us working in the industry, what is the industry's role in changing that narrative beyond the policy changes?
But beyond the policy changes, I think it's one, acknowledging design outcomes aren't the same, right? If I was to look at one of these large A&D firms and put up their market rate work or their Class A work and their affordable housing work or any community-based work, whether it's housing, the community center, the library, if I can tell a stark difference, then you are not doing your part, right? I think firms need to look at when you design for communities of color, if your staff doesn't reflect the community, then you are not doing the part, right? Can the 40-year-old white architect tell the design story of a predominantly Black community? Probably not. And if he can't see his son, his mother, his sister, or his brother living in that community, how is he going to design better? So I think our industry needs to understand diversity is required to have equal design outcomes across the board. That's what they need to start doing. They need to start using a concept, practice safe design, go back to basics. They need to empower their younger designers to challenge their clients, right? If the 22-year-old white girl who went to the top interior design school goes to work for a predominant architecture, male architecture firm, is she gonna feel empowered to speak up? If she's the only designer, she's probably the youngest and the only woman, right? We need to empower them to do better and to advocate for better design outcomes because they want to. This next wave of designers, they wanna make a difference, not just pretty spaces.
So do you see that in the students you work with?
Oh, yes. I've met so many designers as of late saying like, it's not about the pretty, it's about the impact, it's about the people. And I love that. This is the Y generation. And when I say generation, I don't mean like an X or Z or whatever they're called. I mean people who are coming to design because they themselves needed to be healed by spaces. They were inspired by a space that healed them. That's what this next wave of designers are interested in. That gives me hope. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so
Thank
much.
you, girl.
It's been so amazing to have you.
I forgot to ask. I guess I should ask if I should use colorful language or not. Sorry.
No, we welcome that.
You can edit that out.